Hello again. My name's Ian Boyd. I work for Art, Biodiversity and Climate, and we've been working with the Isle of Wight Council and many other organisations and individuals across the island for the past 14 or 15 months to create, I think, called the Local Nature Recovery Strategy. And if you've seen the earlier videos and had a look on this website, you'll have some understanding what that is. It's a new legal requirement on all the counties in England to produce a spatial plan for nature recovery, a spatial plan for wildlife. So, where are the spaces where we're going to be targeting new work for the benefit of biodiversity, habitats, and species, and therefore all of us, in the next 3 to 5 years? And then there'll be a new version that, based on what everyone has learned in that time about what's worked and what hasn't, onto to a subsequent iteration and on from there. Now, you'll know that we've been just picking out some of the key documents that you get a chance to explore on this website during this consultation period. Of course, they'll remain accessible thereafter, so you can come back and dig into them and get the information, hopefully, that you're looking for to support projects that you're trying to do. And we've had a look in general about LNRSs, and we've had a look at the description of the project area, description of the Isle of Wight and its surrounding marine areas, intertidal areas. So we're just going to have a quick look at what's called Document 2 now, which you can access directly from this website, from the consultation part. And this is, as it says here, what are called the priorities and measures. Now, this really is the detail of the LNRS, and it is really, really packed with detail. So this is just going to be a short introduction to this document, because really you're going to need time to properly explore it for yourself and to comment on it and give your thoughts and opinions about whether the measures. Now, these are the actions for wildlife. So priorities are what are the key areas of work that have come through the past year or so of consultations and engagements across the island. What are the key areas of work where benefits for wildlife, nature recovery itself can take place? What are those priority projects and initiatives we'll be thinking about? And the measures really are actions. So what are the practical things that need to be done? And the way this document works is that there are some unmapped measures. So these are just broad guidelines that can apply anywhere, to do with woodlands, to do with grasslands, to do with wetlands. So broad ideas about good management practice, better communication, different ways of working together towards the ends of the LNRS to create better outcomes for nature. And there are mapped measures. Now, you've got access to that map via this website, and you can really explore down to very fine detail where you are, places that you're interested in, places that are familiar to you. And you can actually click on what are the priorities, what are the measures, what are the additional benefits that come from this kind of work in this place geared towards these species and these habitats. So that's how that system works. There's a mapped version, which you can see exactly where it is spatially. And there's this document too, which is the narrative. It's the text that goes with that. It gives you the real detail into what actions are we describing based on all of the things that everyone has contributed over the past year or so for woodlands in these key areas. Now, it's really important to remember this is the first version of the LNRS. So if you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, what about these bits? What about these bits? Well, this is a program that is geared to what feels as though seems to be achievable in the next 3 to 5 years. So what are the first things that we need to be acting on, and why, which is what the document as a whole will help explain. And those are the areas that are highlighted. The unmapped measures are much more general and can apply, of course, anywhere. But the mapped bits are important because they have other implications. One of those, and again, I'll just mention it here, but it's explained as part of this website, as part of the consultation process, is the relationship between those mapped areas and what is called biodiversity net gain. And that is where forms of funding can go into habitat work as a part of the development process. So if development is taking place, whether that's industrial or educational or tourism and recreation or residential, then in some cases it will be looking to be able to improve habitats elsewhere as part of its scheme, as part of the legal agreements that go with that. And the mapped measures will show where that kind of investment needs to take place, depending on what kind of habitat is actually being affected. So there is a technical element to it that is quite important through the planning system. But broadly speaking, the LNRS is there for everyone to participate in, and it's intended to help as a guide as to where the key things we can do are and what those actions should be. It is not compulsory, it's entirely voluntary in the way that people engage with this, but hopefully it's a useful tool that anyone can use to try and get involved in nature recovery. So enough of that. Let's have a quick flick, and it will be a quick flick because there's so much of this, as you can see, as to what document 2 looks like. So first of all, there's some introductory stuff, and we've talked about this a little bit, what LNRSs are, what their purpose is, what the legal framework is that they sit within, what the process of creating this document has been, how we've actually gone through that. And there's a really important audit trail that goes with this. There's a 5th document as part of the library for LNRS, which is all of the technical appendices. So that tells you how the decisions were made, what the process was. And throughout all the documents, there's loads of referencing. So if you want to explore any of the decision making, any of the context, any of the evidence base for this, there's all the information you need as part of this process. Okay, so a little bit of introductory information there. Now, the way this document works is that it describes the priority. So what is the main action, the main area, the main kind of theme, let's call it a theme, for nature recovery that we're talking about. What is the measure itself? What is the description of the action? What do I need to do and where do I need to do it? There'll be a column that tells us what species are going to particularly benefit, groups of species called assemblages, which we'll look at in the next video, and some individual species which are called champions, the ones that kind of carry the weight for a whole bunch of other species that need similar habitat requirements. But there are also additional environmental benefits, and you'll know from the first video, if you've seen that one, that the LNRS is looking at not just nature conservation benefits, although that is prime objective, but also looking at broader national environmental improvements. And you'll see that there's a set of national environment objectives that come out of the Environment Improvement Plan, which is a government document, and they're all coded so you can read across as to what that code means, what it's actually talking about. So you can read across from NEO1 to see that it's to create improved habitat, greatest biodiversity benefits. So that's a core benefit. But it may be that there are others. NEO5 is all about the water environment, for example. So there are relationships around natural flood management and so on. So these bigger environmental objectives are also listed alongside those actions. And all of that information is there for you to cross-reference. A lot of detail in this. And then there are also ecosystem benefits. You may have heard of ecosystem services. That again is ways in which the natural environment, in which functioning, healthy ecosystems support our lives, support the way we go about our daily lives, the way we eat, the way we drink, the way we think to some extent because of our relationship with the natural world in terms of our health, in terms of our culture, in terms of our response to living in the places where we do. And so there's also a set of other environmental benefits. And these are coded according to this diagram here. So again, you can really explore what these ecosystem benefits are. The regulating ones around our environmental quality, the supporting ones around nutrient cycling. That's a very big part of the Isle of Wight LNRS discussion. Cultural ones about the way that we live and learn, and provisioning. Basic provisions of food, for example, all built into healthy ecosystems. Well, the benefits of the actions for nature recovery are also applied to these in this document, and you can read across and see how that works. There's some information about how to navigate that, so I'll leave that there so that you can read it and figure that out. And it may take some time to kind of get to grips with this, but it's all available on this website certainly for the next month in terms of consultation, but it will be permanently available via the Island Nature website. So let's just quickly have a look at some examples. So here's an unmapped measure. So you can see that we're in a section that's trees and woodlands. So habitat types that you'll have seen in document 1, if you've had a chance to have a look at that, are now reflected in document 2. So we're in the wooded environment. That's small woodlands, big woodlands, individual trees, both urban and rural. And we've straight away got an unmapped measure, which the priority is to retain, improve, and extend the network of island woodland mosaics. So that's the big priority. Mosaics are clusters of habitat at quite small scale, within which there are other even smaller habitats. And that's a really important foundational principle of the Isle of Wight LNRS, is that we're looking at mosaics. So rather than just thinking of habitats as sort of homogeneous lumps that are all the same, we're not. And the Isle of Wight is made of these tiny fragments of habitat, really, in UK terms, all glued together and working with one another in quite complicated ways. And these are mosaics. So a wooded area within which there may be some deadwood, there may be some open ground, there may be some watercourses, there may be some grassland, all included in this cluster, but it's a wooded environment. Now, the actual detailed measure within this one, written in bold and then described in text below that, so we'll just do the bold bit. Prioritise the improved management in all woodland sites over 1/2 hectare, and that relates really particularly to the way that funding support for woodland works. All woodlands are important, however, but just in terms of getting the best support for some of this work, there are funding schemes, grant schemes, and other kinds of support that work around these kind of figures, these kind of scales. With priority given to medium and large woodlands over 2 hectares. Now, the reason for that is just the bigger the woodland, the more benefit we can extract from it. But also, in terms of the way we manage woodlands, once you get to a certain size, you can begin to think about coppicing, breaking that woodland up into smaller bits. Very tiny woodlands, that's just impossible, really, and it may even be damaging. So we may to think about managing them in different ways. To maximise structural and age diversity, so stop them all just being exactly the same height with nothing underneath, make them more interesting than that for wildlife where the size allows for that. And secondary habitat provision, grassland, bare ground, scrub transitions, clear fells, watercourses and ponds. In other words, woodlands are not just trees. They contain an awful lot of other stuff as well. How do we think about all of that in the round? Now that applies to all woodlands everywhere. So it's unmapped. And you can take that information and the detail under it, the list of wider environmental benefits, the NEOs, the ecosystem service work, the OEBs in the final column, and the species benefits in the middle column there. So that points us towards the trees and woodland species assemblage, which you can find in document 4, the urban assemblage, because many of these woodlands are urban or associated with settlements. And then some particular species that are most appropriately tied to this measure. So the things that will benefit the most from these kind of actions or this kind of focus. Top of that list for us is the woodland 4. This is a really famous group of 4 woodland mammals: red squirrel, dormouse, that's hazel dormouse, two bats, Becksteins and barberstell. Now we get all 4 in many island woodlands. Certainly most of the medium-sized woodlands have probably got all 4, as well as a lot of other stuff as well. Well, those 4 species, all rare, some of them very, very rare in the UK, are extremely unusual. There are very few, if any, other places in the UK where you're going to get those 4 woodland mammals. And in Europe even, that's a rare combination. So the Isle of Wight is extremely unusual. It has this amazing mammal assemblage, the woodland 4. And so that's a focus of our attention. How can we manage woodlands of any size, of any scale? Even if we don't have them living permanently in there, they may be using them temporarily for feeding or for roosting. So how can we manage the wooded conservation estate of the island in a way that supports those key mammals? What do they need? What do they need to feed? What do they need to eat? Where do they need to hibernate? And we can begin to really fine-tune the management of any woodland by using this toolkit that the LNRS provides. So that's a general unmapped measure. So let's go down to a mapped measure, GW 1.2. Now, when you go to the map and you click on any bit of the LNRS map, it will give you that code, the name of the measure, so you can refer back to this document. It'll have the text in there in the map as well, but you can come back here and really explore the detail of what's being proposed for that bit of the island through the LNRS. So here we're still in the same priority area, this same theme in terms of nature recovery priority, which is retain, improve and extend the network of island woodland mosaics. Remember these clusters of kind of habitats within a wooded framework. And the detail, in this case again, we'll just read the bit that's in bold at the top. And there's a lot more information below that. Enhanced priority landscape scale woodland meadow matrix on the northern clay through managed woodland creation and fostering natural regeneration. Now, that's explained in detail below. And this is quite particular. So this is mapped. And this points us towards the clay. Now, above the chalk on the Isle of Wight, and you'll have got this from document 1 if you've had a look at that, the geology changes very dramatically. And it's broadly a clay plateau. So the soils are different. They're quite varied anyway. Some of those soils are acidic, some of them are alkaline, some are capped with gravels. Some have limestone underneath them or exposed as outcrops within that geology. Great variety. But broadly speaking, it's a clay landscape. So within that area where most of our woodland still remains, partly because it's a difficult landscape to farm, for example, so a lot of that wet, sticky soil has remained wooded. So within those areas, there's a very particular habitat called woodland meadow. And that is open grassland areas on clay. So they have a particular kind of chemistry, a particular kind of biology, particular kind of geology, set within a woodland. The woodland, to some extent, protects and enfolds these little meadow environments. Quite a particular specialised habitat. And that's picked out through the LNRS. It's clearly a priority that's come through in the last year. And we have a detailed list of actions, the measures that can be taken to support that kind of habitat in these kind of places. And if you go to the map, you'll see where those are recommended. Now, you can still take that approach and apply it to other places where it's suitable. Don't forget, this LNRS is looking at the next 3 to 5 years. So it's picking out this first tranche of priority places where we can get on and do this work together, collectively, all of us working for nature recovery. And again, it gives us the national environment objectives. You'll see that the NEOs tend to appear pretty much en bloc for many of these because all of these actions are supporting all of these things, if we do them in the right way, of course. The ecosystem service measures, the OEBs, across to the right-hand side. And again, in the middle, there's species that are going to be good indicators of whether we're doing our job or not. So some of these species are going to be things that we can monitor. So if the nature recovery work is successful as a result of that priority, those actions in the measures, we should see a change in the populations of some of these key species. One of these is the reddish buff moth, species found nowhere else in the UK. Super rare, relies on these funny little sort of heathland-like grasslands on clay, very often within a kind of wider wooded landscape. What can we do to make sure we're protecting those habitats, and how can we measure the success against the populations of these key species? So that's an example of a mapped measure and an unmapped measure, how it works in the table. Under each of these habitat types, and we'll just flick through the rest, there's a mix of mapped and unmapped measures, but in each section, when you get to the bottom of the section, which we are about to do, there will be a summary of what those measures have actually had to say. So that just gives you a sense, and it makes some sense to actually read that first before you go into the table, because it just gives you a flavour of what the work is actually trying to achieve. Gives you some additional resources. So these are links to other websites, other documents that expand the idea, in this case of managing woodlands and treed landscapes. And then it will also give you a map. So this is obviously a print off of the LNRS map itself, which is a live interactive document, but this gives you a snapshot of where those measures are actually applied. So the mapped measures look like this for trees and woodlands. So this whole section of the LNRS, when it's on a map of the Isle of Wight, focuses on these areas. And when you go to the live map, you can click onto any one of those areas, and it will give you the information that you need to understand what's being proposed there. And that's a chance for you to have your say, to give your opinion on whether this is right. Are we kind of talking about the right stuff in the right place? Is it understandable? Does it make sense? Are you finding it easy to navigate? So some of this is about actually the tools that the LNRS provides. How can we make it more usable, more user-friendly, something that can be accessed in the best possible way to support whatever it is you're trying to do for nature recovery in your own way, as well as the detail of the actual places. So do please get involved in this. Have your say, make your comments, try and help us make it the best thing it can be for island nature. And that will make sure that we move on to the best possible successor to this, and that we get the best possible results in the short term. Now, I'm going to just stop sharing there. There's a great deal more in that document, of course, but you get the idea. A set of priorities, a set of mapped and unmapped measures, the detail of those actions, the wider environmental benefits that those actions are going to deliver, and then the species and the groups of species, the assemblages of species that are going to be things that are that we can track, that we can monitor. If you like, they're kind of the most visible things that are going to benefit, and but there'll be a whole lot of other species benefiting as well. But we can track the impact of that nature recovery work by looking at some of these key champion species. So that's how document two works, and you can use that alongside the interactive map to really dig into the LNRS and see what it's saying, where it's saying. We need to do stuff, and then give us your opinion about whether that makes sense and how you would like to see that taken forward. So thanks very much for your help, and we'll leave it there. Thank you.